Today we have a real treat in the studio, none other than Paul Poteet. Paul is the CEO and founder of Surge Development, a real estate development company focused on multifamily projects across the country. Over his 5-year career in development, Paul has personally led the entitlements for over 3,500 units, spread across 40 projects in 7 states, totaling over $55 million in land value. Surge currently has over 10 deals in various stages of development, totaling over 1,000 units. Is that right?
Actually, I was doing the total today, and it's about 1,600.
1,600, okay. Yeah. So growing quickly. Paul's day-to-day role at Surge includes overseeing all acquisitions, entitlements, maintaining and creating relationships with capital partners, and overseeing construction of projects, as well as ensuring company alignment and core values, man. So thanks for being here, Paul. Glad to have you.
Dude, I'm happy to be here. Yeah. I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah, this should be fun. And I mentioned earlier, we connected about a year ago, and really, dude, I reached out because I had seen your guys' growth, and I was like, Paul is obviously a stellar, developer. He's able to find opportunities, and it seems like from you guys started like a year ago, right?
Yeah, it was
over a year ago.
I left my last company November of 2021, mm-hmm. So I think it's about 15 months, whatever that ends up being.
It's insane. Because I follow you on LinkedIn and some of social media stuff, and it's like to see where you guys have gone over a 14-month timeline. It's actually insane. So I want to talk through that. But the first question I usually ask my guests, Paul, just to give everyone kind of lay of the land and your background, is to talk a little bit about your upbringing and maybe childhood or teenage or college, and kind of how you evolved to who you are today would be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, so I won't go over everything, but I grew up in the Seattle area, so Gig Harbor is the town that I'm from, and which I loved everything about that area. For whatever reason, I ended up here in Utah, but there's a couple things as I was growing up that reflecting on the other day that really helped me to at least get to where I'm at right now, right? And one, I had wonderful parents, right? And obviously there's things that they could have done better as any parent can, but just the things that they taught me as far as being socially aware and caring for other people, being independent is one thing in particular. All my siblings are quite independent, and I can't tell you exactly what my parents did to instill that in us, but whatever they did a great job. So that's one thing, that feeling of independence and taking care of yourself and really going after the things that you want was core to my childhood experience. I was pretty active, so I was in the Boy Scouts. I had some really good, scout leaders growing up who taught me a lot, but also they just took us out to have experiences, camping or hiking or kayaking, mountain biking, all that kind of stuff. I got exposed to at an early age, which made me really just love life. I still I travel all the time, and I mountain bike a lot and do a lot of those things. It's just those things that you add on top of my professional life to have an enjoyable experience. And the other thing I was thinking of that was really core to my development is sports. So I played football and baseball growing up, and I was never particularly good. Like I was voted the captain of both my football and baseball teams, but I was never a starter, right? Which for me, it was just all about hard work, learning how to be a member of a team. And because I was willing to put in the work, even though I didn't have the talent, I think that was noticed a lot and allowed me to have some early opportunities to develop leadership skills, right? So those are a few things that come to mind as far as my early childhood that are key to my upbringing and what has made me so far who I am today.
That's great. And I love your point, being team captain, but not being a starter, and hard work over talent, right? I think there's a huge point there that there's a lot of talented people who are naturally gifted, but they don't put in the work to be able to be where they want to be. And I played baseball too. And honestly, I kind of felt the same way, where I felt like I was naturally gifted, and my early years in baseball, I was super successful, like through, middle school, early high school. But where you started seeing the difference between the guys who are really successful and the guys who kind of drifted off was how much time and how much commitment and hard work they're willing to put into it. And so I think that's a really good point in business too. It's like, if you look at some of the most successful people out there, a lot of them didn't graduate from college. A lot of them dropped out of high school, or like the typical mold. You wouldn't look at that person and say he's the sharpest tool in the shed, but instead it's like, what is he doing when others are not looking? So I like that, dude. That's really cool.
I just a little bit more to add there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Like that's just it's a habit that you build, right? Like there's a lot of people who for whatever reason haven't instilled a habit of being able to put in the work. And if you don't have that habit at an early age, working hard can sometimes be a drain on you. But for me, that's part of the fun, you know? Like I love even playing sports today, like pickleball, right? And people will see me play pickleball or volleyball and be like, man, you're like really intense when you play. And I'm like, well, that's the only way I play. Like I don't know another way to do it, right? But that's part of the fun is when you work really, really hard. You know, whether you're good or not, it's an enjoyable experience, and that's not just for sports; it's for everything, right?
Yeah, 100%. Joy being found in the work itself and the journey. Love it, man. Well, you went to BYU Idaho, is that right?
Yeah, okay. I did.
So yeah, tell us a little bit about your mindset, kind of going to college. I know everyone approaches it differently, and I mentioned a lot of entrepreneurs view college as like, well, maybe I'm just checking the box, or I don't really need this. Did you know what you wanted to do going into school, and kind of what was your thought there?
I did know I wanted to do going to school, but that's not where I ended up. I wanted to be a doctor and a surgeon. And I don't know why. I remember one time just with our church, we do, the sacrament, and we pour water in these little cups. And some doctor in my ward saw me pouring water in this cup. They're like, wow, you have great surgeon hands. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to be a surgeon, And so I started school with that path and very quickly realized it wasn't for me. So I kind of searched myself and what I wanted to do. And in high school, I'd been involved pretty early on with some business clubs, and I ran our student store in high school and all that. And I always really liked it. So I decided to go, the business route. And at BYU Idaho, you have your major, which is business management, but then you have an emphasis that you choose. So you have, I think, social media marketing, finance, and entrepreneurship. And of those, entrepreneurship called to me the most. So that's what I chose, and immediately loved it. I started getting involved with the teachers there. It's a really good experience with a lot of those classes because they're not massive like you might get at some larger universities. You get a lot more one-on-one experience with your professors, who are oftentimes retired entrepreneurs and business professionals themselves. And anyway, as I started getting into that path, I quickly knew that it was for me. I started a number of small businesses during my college experience, none of which were incredibly successful, but I learned that it's the experience that I wanted for my life.
Got it. And you mentioned starting some businesses in college. I saw, like, I think it was your LinkedIn, you had Panini Plus. Was that like sandwiches related, or what was that? Yeah. So in BYU Idaho with the business track, they have a semester called IBC. I forget what the acronym stands for, but essentially it's a semester where all of your classes are centered around creating a business together that's on campus, okay. Right? So we might have different courses, like you might have the marketing class that semester and the accounting class, but it's all about this business that you create on campus. So some people do a retail business, others do a food-oriented business, and there's service-oriented businesses and all that. So Panini Plus was part of my coursework actually for that semester, IBC, where we started a Panini restaurant in one of the campus buildings and ran that together. They switch out. So I started off as the CEO, and then through the course of the semester they switch, so everyone has a chance for a C-level position in the company. But that experience taught me that I never want to be a restaurant owner. It's really, really hard to make that work. But I started another company outside of just coursework. This is more for fun. And my friends sometimes make fun of me for this, but I thought it was a cool idea at the time. And that was, we called it Enchanted Entertainment, right? And the premise of that is we would hire,
women and men to dress up as Disney characters and go to kids' birthday parties in the Idaho Falls area, et cetera. So we had like Anna, Elsa, Spider-Man, that kind of stuff. I bought costumes, and we had an event at the Idaho Falls skating rink where we had 300 people attend, and it was a skate with Anna and Elsa event. And so we did some things like that, but I never made money on it. I got my money back. I didn't make money.
Well, hey, you were trying, man. That's the thing. And to that point, I didn't mention this earlier, but a big reason I did this podcast is when I was at BYU in the finance and accounting program, I was so like structured in my mind about I'm going to go the corporate route, and I'm going to go get a big job and get experience, and didn't really think about entrepreneurship. But to your example, it's like starting a panini shop or thinking about how can I make some money on the side? I'm going to go hire a bunch of people to dress up as Disney characters. I had the founder of Swiggin here last week, and one of her points is like, we didn't know what we were doing. We just found a building and started selling drinks. And I think a lot of people complicate entrepreneurship, or they put a business up on a pedestal of like, I've got to have it all figured out. And that's what I hope people get out of this podcast. It's like, man, you just said, I'm going to go find some teenagers and dress them up as Disney princesses and go try and make some money. It's like, and that was probably business overnight. You know, you had an idea and you made it happen. And so I think that's great, man. And you said you gravitated towards entrepreneurship in your coursework in school. What was it about entrepreneurship? Like, why did it click like that? What was it that turned you into that direction? What was appealing to you? Yeah,
I think that there's a number of reasons, right? One is just my natural disposition. Like, there are some people that you meet, they're accountants, and you're like, that makes sense. They're an accountant, you know, just because that's their personality, right? And for me, entrepreneurship and business came naturally. Like, when I was doing the medical route, like, I had to work really hard at that to really fully understand all the concepts. Just, it's not natural to how my mind thinks, but business was. So that's one of the reasons it just clicked, made sense. Like, I didn't have to study all that hard for business or entrepreneurship. I didn't have to do a lot of, reading the textbooks and all that, just because it just makes sense, right? But also there's an element of freedom, right? And I want to create a large company. We'll probably talk about this later in our conversation, but we have some big goals for what, the organization of Surge Development we want to become. But more importantly, I want to create a life for myself that I'm just excited about, man. I can wake up every day and be happy about what I'm doing. And a lot of that is outside of, the company and what we're doing. And entrepreneurship is one of the only ways that I'm aware of that you can create that kind of freedom and flexibility for yourself. When you work for someone else, especially in a large corporate environment, that flexibility is difficult to find.
Yeah, 100%. And that resonates and is in line with the reason a lot of people go into entrepreneurship is, even though, and us on my end starting this business, right, you're working more than you probably ever have, but it's understanding that you are in control. You have the ultimate, say in kind of when and where you allocate your time. And that means a lot, because when you're working for somebody else, it can wear on you, it can eat you away in terms of like, hey, I'm really not in control of anything. I'm not in control of how much I make. I'm not in control of how much, how I spend my time. It's just, so I agree 100%. Well, so coming out of BYU, Idaho, you started with, is it Sumatera?
Yeah, Sumatera.
Was that your first full-time role out of BYU, Idaho?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and at the time it wasn't Sumatera. It was Mike Watson Investing, right? Okay. So my last semester I had gone to a friend who's an entrepreneur here in the area, and just kind of telling him about what I was thinking about doing, and I mentioned real estate. So he connected me with Mike Watson, who was doing a seminar in a couple weeks, and so I went to that seminar, and he just talked about development, and I'd never heard of that before. I didn't know that was a thing. But loved what I heard. So I started connecting with Mike and asking him questions, attending some of his educational events that he did, and as I graduated, my plan was to move down here and to start my own development company, right? And Mike really, really liked what he saw in me. And so he asked me to lunch and was like, hey, why don't you come work for me? And my first answer was, no, I'm not interested, right? I'm going to start my own thing. I don't want to work for someone else. But he persisted, over the days and weeks that followed and said, it makes a lot of sense for a young guy like you to come and learn under someone else's, someone who's been there and done it, not have to waste your own money in the learning process, but waste someone else's money. And the more I thought about it, it made sense. But the structure that I started at that time, I wasn't an owner from day one in Mike Watson Investing, which at the time was really just it was a seminar company. Mike had been out of the business for a long time, and I won't get too far into that, but it was basically all starting from scratch, right? And so hadn't really had anything development-wise going on. But I went to work for him for $1,600 a month. So it was just barely enough to cover my base expenses. Mm-hmm. And in exchange, I got 10% of company revenue. So that was the deal that we made, and we just started building it from there. And after about 1.5 years, 2 years of building that, we renamed the company Sumaterra. I had bought in at that point, and so became an owner, using my 10% that I had received plus some other funds that I had saved up prior. And that's how that whole thing began.
And were you guys based in Idaho, or is that here in Utah?
That was here in Utah.
In Utah. Okay.
Yeah. So I moved from BYU, Idaho after college down here pretty quickly after I graduated.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
And after that first year or so working together and you kind of bought in and formed Sumaterra, how did your partnership split at that point? You mentioned you were 10. Did it go like 50-50?
Yeah. So I bought in and I had some funds that got me through college and that allowed me to be able to make that sacrifice on the salary too, just from a life insurance payout on one of my family members. So I was able to buy in a little bit more than just 10% of the company, but I bought in at 17.5%.
Okay.
That's how much I owned.
So that's where you guys kind of stabilized. And then before we go into the more in the Sumaterra, you mentioned when you're coming out of BYU, Idaho, you were deciding, okay, do I want to do this on my own or go work for somebody?
Yeah.
And that's the question that I get a lot. And I still ask myself from time to time, like, I graduated from BYU. I spent 5-6 years at JP Morgan, Dakota Pacific, working for somebody else. What would it have looked like if I just graduated from BYU and started Park West, like just decided to go and do it on my own? What do you think the benefit, pros and cons were of going and working with somebody else versus just starting Surge day one?
Well, let me first say, in hindsight, it was the right decision, right? And Mike, much to his credit, gave me an opportunity that very few people get. And that's someone who's had previously before the Great Recession hit back in 2009-ish, had amassed a $55 million portfolio, right? So he'd been there to a very high level and, for a lot of different reasons, lost most of that. And so being able to work under someone who had experienced that success, but also that degree of failure and learned from those mistakes was really invaluable for me. So it was the right decision. Not everyone gets that kind of opportunity. So I know that I'm very lucky in that aspect. But there's so much, especially in development specifically. I mean, there's other industries where maybe the barriers to entry is a little bit less, and the amount of expertise and knowledge you have to have is less also to really go out and make it. But in development, there's so many little things that if you don't know about it, or if you're not paying attention to it, could sink you, right? And luckily, I've learned most of those things. But even today, like there's things that come up, and I'm like, I've never even seen that. It's a big deal on some projects. So that's a continuing thing that'll always happen. But without a good foundation, it's really hard to be successful at a high level in this business. So yeah, someone going into development, I would say either you got to start really, really small, or go and get experience from someone who's been there and done that. I don't know how much that might apply to some other industries, but I think for the most part, that's probably the right decision to go and do.
Yeah, I agree. And as I've thought more and more about that, I tend to be a little bit impatient. Like, when you see what's been interesting to me is you see people who, started flipping houses, right? And then they've graduated kind of into like a duplex or fourplex or whatever, and they've snowballed this, and they're making insane amount of money. They never went to school, never worked for a big shop. And so I struggled with that, like, man, like, look at those guys. They didn't go work for 5-6 years at a big shop. But to your point, and how I view this is, if you go and work on someone else's dime, and you get to let that risk, you get to take risks on their behalf and learn and get educated. Your starting point is much more elevated than it would be if you were starting with a duplex.
Absolutely.
So I when people ask me that question, I agree exactly what you said, Paul. It's as nice as it sounds to come out of college or high school and start trying to put together development deals. You're going to have to either ride someone's coattails for a little bit, or start with a single family home or duplex or something very small and gradually work your way up. Or you can go work for Sumatera or JP Morgan and do that for several years, and then go start on a 200 unit deal, or a 500 unit deal. And so it just changes kind of the platform a little bit. So
absolutely,
I think that makes sense.
And a key thing there is funding too, right? When you're brand new into a deal and you want to do a bigger, even if it's a 10plex, right, for your first deal, well, who's going to fund that? Who's going to trust you, who hasn't done anything before, to give you their money to go and build that project? And so there has to be a buildup of experience there. And so you could do that starting small, but even if you're flipping homes, right? Well, that's not really a comparison to developing a home, right? They're very different skill sets. I see a lot of people that become flippers and gradually build that up and then want to get into development, and still it's starting over. They make a lot of mistakes. And so, going to work for someone else and getting that experience under someone else's dime is typically the right decision, especially in real estate. Yeah,
love it. Well, tell us a little bit about your time at Sumatera. I think you were there for about 5 years or so.
Yeah.
How was that experience, and what did you guys grow there?
Yeah, we had a really good experience, honestly. Mike and I, we had a lot of fun growing Sumatera, and we saw it grow from this tiny little seminar company to a year in, we stopped doing seminars. We really started focusing on deals. Most of what we did to start was we would find pieces of land. So something that's already zoned to permit multifamily by law, we would find that piece of land, and then we would get all the paperwork done for it. So we get your civil engineering drawings, your architectural renderings, and we paint this picture of what this property can become. And we get all the legal steps done through the city processes to, or I guess permitting is what I would say with that. We get all the permitting done so that we could deliver it to a builder or a developer who they could buy the property and just immediately get started with it, as opposed to taking the year-long process that it takes to do the permitting, right? Mm-hmm. So we started doing that and selling the land to someone who wanted to build it. So we weren't building a lot ourselves. But in doing that process, we found, we'd be buying a piece of land for, $500,000. And just by doing the entitlement process or the permitting process, it cost us maybe $50,000. And we were able to sell that same piece of land for, $1 million, sometimes $1.5 million. We had several deals where we made 350% on the initial land value. So it was quite lucrative. But we did a lot of those for the first 3 years of our business and used that to build up some cash and some reputation with investors that had participated with us on those land deals to start construction. So our first construction deal was a duplex, and then we went into quite the increase to a 32 unit apartment complex. Then we did a 36 unit, then went over to another 40 in the Dallas area, 96, 107, and just started growing from there. So
got it. Yeah. Wow. And I like to talk about kind of the first deal and the architecture. And so maybe it's the duplex or the 32, whatever you want to touch on, but just from getting that tied up, raising capital, the debt, like how did you, because I think the biggest hurdle for people is that first deal. And once you can do your first deal, the second comes much easier. And so maybe touch on a little bit on kind of what you define as like, this was our first construction deal or development deal and how you guys executed on that.
Yeah. I'll talk about the 32plex because the duplex was our first, but it's a little bit less exciting.
Sure.
But it's a huge step up to go from 2 units to 32 units. 2 units is still, you can get it as a residential type loan, whereas 32 units has to be commercial loan. So that was, there was a lot of learning opportunities that came with doing that deal. Luckily for the capital, we had, it was one of Mike's old contacts. And he had the funds and financial ability to do the project just with us. We didn't have to go get a lot of different partners. So it's a lot easier when you have just one guy who has a ton of money as opposed to having to go and collect a lot of money, which is what we're doing now. But so we had that part tied up pretty quickly, which is nice. But we had never built something that size. And for Mike, he hadn't built something that size in a long time. And so there was a lot of learning curves that we had to overcome with getting the right pricing locked in and finding the right general contractor and getting all the building permit done and working through some of those early problems that come with construction and all that. And so, there's just so much to learn in that. But at the end of the day, we were pretty conservative in our underwriting and we were able to perform on it. We built it in, I think, about 12 months. And when we started leasing it up, the whole thing was full within the first 30 days from certificate of occupancy. And I think rents ended up being about 15% higher than what we underwrote them on. And we had the blessing of being in one of the best real estate markets in the history of our country. And so when we underwrote it at a 5.5 cap, and I think we were getting offers at 3.5 cap.
Was this in Utah, this deal?
This was in Ogden, Utah. Okay. Yeah, and that was one we decided to hold. So we weren't selling, but we were getting unsolicited offers at those kind of cap rates. And so, and now that I left Sumaterra, I don't own it anymore, but Sumaterra still does, and it's quite the successful project for them. Yeah,
I'm sure. And on the financing side, so you mentioned you had one kind of equity partner. Did you go get a construction loan?
Yeah.
Or did he? Okay.
Yeah, we did. We used a local bank. Okay. Here in Utah for that construction loan, and actually went pretty smoothly. That's probably one of the smoothest construction loans we've ever done, just because of the quality of the partner that we had. But they're not always that easy, especially in the last year. There's been some tricky ones that we've had to get done.
Yeah,
which we've done, but that's for me the most stressful part of this whole business is getting the debt secured.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in today's market. How big was what was the total capital stack or sources and uses on the project?
I don't remember exactly. I would guess it was somewhere in the neighborhood. We needed about $2 million in equity. Okay. And I would guess the whole construction loan was probably around $7 to $8 million.
Okay. So call it, $9-10 million total project cost. And then you guys held on to that one. Sounds like. So, okay. Well, that's super helpful. I was going to ask on the debt side, loan guarantees, how have you guys handled, or how did you handle that at Sumaterra? Because typically, just for those listening, when you go get a construction loan or debt, you have to have somebody with an adequate net worth or balance sheet to be able to sign up for some of the guarantee on the loan. So how did you guys solve for that with your project? Yeah. So typically a lender, and it depends on who the lender is, right? If you're going to a bank, which is a more traditional source versus a private lender, like a debt fund or something like that, they do have a little bit more flexibility with the private side than they do on the traditional, banks and REITs and all that. But we always need someone who can help guarantee the loans. What they're looking for is someone who has a total net worth equivalent to the total loan amount, and they want to see usually 5 to 10% of that liquid also. And being a young company with the amount of deals that we're doing, whether that was Sumaterra at the time or Surge Development now, we only have so much financial capacity to do these projects. So we have to bring on partners who can help us to fill that role of guaranteeing these loans. I bring on partners who do that. So I pay a percentage of the deal, and they become a voting partner in that project. I like to take the general contractors and get them involved in that capacity. I'd say about 50, maybe even more, 50% of our deals have the general contractor as the loan guarantor. But it's a nice deal for them. If they're coming in and they're getting, let's say 10% or 15% of a deal, well, that could be millions of dollars without them having to really put much capital in at all. So it's a great return on investment when you look at it from that aspect. All they're doing is they're putting their balance sheet up as collateral potentially. But most of what we do is a non-recourse loan, which means
lender doesn't have the ability to really pursue them personally for the loan. They underwrite it on a deal specifically on the merits of the deal, which significantly reduces the risk and liability of the loan guarantor as well. So when we just add up all these things to mitigate, how much risk they're really taking, but also to give them that kind of reward, it's a no-brainer for people that are able to meet the qualifications.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. And yeah, it speaks to just having a partner and the necessity to do that and filling gaps where you can't fill yourself. And I think the end game for any developer or real estate operator is to ultimately be able to sign on the debt yourself once you have the financial wherewithal to do so. And
sure.
Until you get there.
And I do co-sign on every loan. So mostly, like, it's not like you're washing your hands of the deal, but it's bringing in someone else who can help supplement what you lack.
Yeah, that's great. Well, what was the ultimate exit from Sumaterra? Why did you leave? And then what was the catalyst to starting Surge?
Yeah. I learned a ton from Mike and from my experience at Sumaterra, and I'm really proud of what we were able to build there. The last year to year and a half when I was there, I noticed things started to change as far as my ability to help influence and guide the company to where, the vision that I had for it, and there's some of the decisions and approach that we took with relationships and things like that. And I'm not saying it's necessarily bad. It just didn't align personally with my vision for the company I wanted to create. And so that led ultimately to the decision to leave. And when I left, I think Mike and I were on the same page of, we just had different goals, different things that we thought should be done. And so when I left, it was very amicable. And quite necessary, I think. But
got it.
It was the right decision. The second I left, I knew it was a good decision, and haven't really looked back.
That's great. How long have you been thinking about Surge? Prior to leaving, and what did that month, 2 month, 3 months look like after you left to getting Surge launched? Yeah,
it's funny. I wasn't really, I knew I wanted to build a company, right? But I didn't know, I wanted to do it immediately. So in the back of my mind, I had a couple months where Mike and I had decided, I was going to be leaving, but I had transitioned out, right? Mm-hmm. So I had a couple months to think about it. I'm like, it'd be nice if I just took a break, right? And went and traveled a little bit and had some fun. And then I left, and before I knew it, I hired an employee, and I have 4 deals under contract. I'm like, well, I guess I'm not going to take a break at all. Yeah. It just I don't even know what came over me, but I guess that goes to our conversation earlier of enjoying the work, right? Mm-hmm. And once you enjoy what you do, it's hard not to do it, right? And not to do it all the way. So that for the first couple months after I left was really just about tying up good sites. So I knew that we wanted to focus really in the South. I have one site in Ogden just because I'm really familiar with it, but most of our focus is in Texas and the Carolinas, which are all really good growing markets.
Yeah.
With a lot of opportunity. So that's where we focused on, and we tied up 3 to 5 deals within the first couple months there, and just started working on getting the entitlements done for it. And that's really the foundation of what we have today. The development cycle is a long time, right? From actually tying up a site to having it built and delivered, you're 2 to 4 years, depending on the size of the deal. So we're still pretty early in the life cycle of our company. With having only tied up our first deals about a year ago, but that's what really started the foundation of what we're working towards today.
That's great. And speaking on funding, when you left Sumaterra, obviously it takes a little bit of capital to start a business, right?
Sure.
And you guys have hired a few employees, it looks like. Was that capital that from your exit from Sumaterra, where you just hey, I'm going to roll this in? And how have you been at this point? Are you guys seeing fees coming in the door? How are you self-sustaining now? So
when I left, I had a couple million on my payout from Sumaterra. Cool. So that's when Mike bought me out, and I immediately just started reinvesting that in both employees and deals. To get a deal all the way through the entitlement or permitting process, it usually takes anywhere I've seen as cheap as, $50,000, as expensive as $150,000. So that's always something that you have to balance of like, we can do as many deals as we have money for, that's one of our strengths of the company is being able to find, good projects. But it's just a matter of balancing. Like, I don't want to put my company in a place where we don't have the capital for emergencies or to take care of payroll and things like that by putting up too many deals. So we're just carefully, added the deals that we felt like we could handle. And I try and maintain a burn rate of 12 months typically. And that's what I make my decisions by is like, do we add another deal right now? Do we add another employee? And where is that going to take our burn rate to? And during a time like this where it's a little bit slower, we try to increase that a little bit more where we can. But the first year, we did really well. I think aside from my payout from Sumaterra, Surge by itself collected total fees of right around $3.6 million. Wow. And that's not including the expenses. So obviously that's not our profit, but as far as revenue went, we did pretty successful. We did pretty well for the first year. And
that's majority of development fees, or are you just including acquisition, or how do you guys structure your fees?
Yeah. There's three ways that we make money. So the first is that entitlement process or permitting process that I described takes a long time and takes, like I said, 50 to 150 grand, right? And I'd say on average, it takes about 8 to 9 months to get something through that process. And we don't bring in capital partners until after that's all done. So there's this time of us taking on that risk and doing the work to make a deal happen. And obviously, being a business, we expect to get compensated for that risk. So when we bring on capital partners, it's after the entitlement process is done, and we do a markup basically on the work and risk that we've taken. And we sell that to our new entity where we brought our capital partners on, and we stay on as the GP on the deal for construction. So with that, we've gotten quite a few fees for the entitled land markups as we funded these deals. And then after that, we make money with a developer fee. So it's just a percentage assessed on the construction cost that gets paid out through construction draws. And then obviously, at the exit of an asset. So when we sell it or refinance, we either get, the capital gains on the sale or the income on the rents that we collect.
Got it. No, that's great, man. And right now it's about 1,600 units in various stages of the development process.
That's right.
Of that 1,600, how much are you actually actively under construction on and collecting a development fee?
About 400.
400 units.
400 units. Yeah.
That's great. And the other, $3 million or so that you guys generated so it sounds like a majority of that first year was kind of markup.
That was all just the entitled land markups. I mean, it's a small degree, the developer fees on projects we'd started by the end of the year. But the majority of that is just the land markups.
Yeah.
Which for us is a really good sign, because if that's just the first, phase of our company and we're able to do that kind of volume in our first year, we're setting ourselves up really, really well for this next year, and especially the year after that, once some of these projects start getting built and we're able to get some sales and things like that. So we did good, nowhere near where we have the capability to be once we have, these projects go all the way through the life cycle.
Sure. Absolutely. In terms of your guys, growth and you mentioned you guys are great at finding deals, and I talked about it at the beginning, but it's like, I feel like every 3 weeks you're posting a new deal that's like, hey, we just got this one under contract in South Carolina or wherever. Yeah. What is your guys' process like? How are you able to source deals and grow the way you've grown? Because for us, and this market's it's getting tough, right? It's tough to make deals pencil from a yield standpoint. There's a big spread between a buyer and seller's expectations where the market needs to meet. So I would love to hear, Paul, how you guys are working through finding deals. Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of really good deals over the past couple of months because of what the market's given us too. Mm-hmm. A lot of people have slowed down in their acquisitions, which means that there's more to choose from, right? But then we haven't been able to take advantage of those always because there's do we have the capital and the investors ready to be able to take that down?
Yeah.
But as far as a finding strategy and standpoint, we find markets that are that meet three primary criteria. There's a lot more that we look at, but we want to have a market that's consistently growing in population. Typically, we look at that over a 10-year window. We look at rent growth in the last 5 to 10 years as well, and we want to see that consistently and reliably growing. And then we look at the local economy, right? So what kind of employers are in the area? What activities are we seeing? Are these employers expanding their businesses? Like, for example, we have a deal in Spartanburg, South Carolina, which is a smaller market, but it's not too small. It's a secondary market, not a tertiary. But BMW's North America headquarters is there, and they just announced, I think, like $1 billion expansion to their local facility. So we see that and say, these employers are growing. That's going to increase the demand that there is in that area for this entry-level multifamily housing that we specialize in. So those are the types of markets that we really select. A lot of people are regional, right? So you live in Utah. A lot of people will say, I only want to be doing deals in Utah. Well, technology has evolved to a point where you can do a deal anywhere in the country and still have minimal travel requirements, right? Obviously, when something's under construction, you want to have a continued presence regularly there. So we try and visit it regularly with someone on our staff. But for the most part, on the city processes, it's all just online. Mm-hmm. So we don't feel like we're constrained geographically. Now, we don't want to go crazy. Like, you don't want to have one deal or 20 deals in 20 different markets. Like, you want to have efficiency there, but we choose a couple markets that we feel like have a lot of opportunity, and we go to those areas. So, for example, South Carolina, there's a couple markets there that we feel like have a lot of opportunity. So each market we might have 2 to 3 deals in, right? Yep. So when we go there, we can visit a lot of different sites together. But we choose those markets aside from those 3 criteria to primarily what's available, right? We don't like to do zone changes. Most people that are in development will tie up a great location, right, and a lot of acreage, and they'll try and go do a zone change. And there's a risk associated with that. Some people are very good at it, but there's a risk that where you have to spend a lot of money, and there's a chance for any reason someone could say no. Yeah. So we find those markets that meet those 3 criteria that also have ample zoning within either the primary city or the outlying municipalities that allow for multifamily. And that's where we'll really focus our time. Is we find a city that has lots of zones that will permit for what we want to do already. We don't have to go ask permission, especially for that. Then we're going to do a lot of deals in that city, assuming it meets those first 3 criteria.
That's great. And from a sourcing standpoint, are you building relationships with local brokers? Are you just, hitting up owners directly? What's kind of your strategy on the outreach?
Yeah, I in no way intend to offend anyone who's a broker that may be listening to this podcast, but I prefer not to work with them, just because there are very few brokers who are truly experts in commercial land, and especially multifamily land. And because of that, I try to avoid it because they oftentimes just get in the way, right? And I have worked with some great brokers, but a lot of them just don't have that expertise. So yes, we look at what's available on the market in terms of LoopNet and different high-end brokerages, but also when you know what you have, like, you're going to be asking the top price for it, right? And oftentimes, like, I just looked at a deal here in Provo that someone was asking like $63,000 a door. And I think the top I'm willing to pay is $15,000 a door. So yeah, like, I'm not going to make that work, right? And it's because they know exactly what they have. It's entitled for townhomes and multifamily. Mm-hmm. But so we'll find these zones, and we'll pull up a zoning map with the Google Maps right next to it, and we'll say, what vacant land is zoned this way, and we'll just go contact the property owner. Got it. And that's our preferred way of doing it. So we do have some deals where we're working with a broker, but most of it, we've just approached the seller directly.
I love that approach, and we do very similar thing. And as much as I love brokers, and they are a lot, like, on the acquisition side, I'd say they're a little bit more of the lifeblood for acquisition, volume. But when you introduce a broker into the process, it does throw a completely different element in. And I've never met a broker I've never met a deal that with a broker involved that's truly off market. Like you're the only one looking at it, because typically they've got relationships with 3-4 other groups, and it becomes a process. And it is what it is. But I think that's a super smart way to do it. How you guys are doing it. I want to talk a little bit about structure. I mean, we've talked about this a little bit, but when you guys put a deal under contract, how are you structuring that with your investors? What is the typical lay of the land from, if there's a preferred return, how much equity they're bringing in, what maybe the splits look like, and whatever you can touch on. You don't have to give away the farm here, but just how you guys typically like to look at that.
So there's what we're doing right now and what we're going to be doing in the future, right? So first off, I mentioned this earlier, but we don't bring in investment until after we have city approvals completed, right? So we're able to negotiate with our sellers long timelines to allow us to get all through the city process before we have to close. But when we do go and bring on capital partners, it's usually just high net worth individuals, and we have a couple smaller funds. And as we grow, we'll appeal more to the institutional family office money, that kind of stuff. But that's where we're at right now. We're currently funding through a syndicated approach, which essentially means you're bringing in people who are putting in money, and in exchange they're becoming owners in the property. So they're not necessarily investing; they're more of a joint venture partner with you, in a sense. So with that, we offer a 12% pref return, which accrues annually but is paid out at the end of the deal, and then we give them a waterfall or ownership in the deal on top of that. And our target is usually to get them, if it's a build and sell type deal where our intention is to build it and immediately sell after construction, it's usually about a two-year window. So we say 22 to 30 months roughly. And our target is to get you about 1.8x over that life cycle, which ends up being between 35 and 40% annualized. So we're pretty good in that sense, and we've been able to accomplish those returns at minimum on most of our deals. So we've been lucky in that aspect also. But that's what we're currently doing, and we'll continue to do that for the next couple of years. But we're also building a fund. So with that, obviously our capital stack and investment structure is going to change, and I think we're going to be targeting an 8% pref with a waterfall that gets you up to 25% annualized. With a pretty heavy split in your favor. And then after that, then it's a much heavier split in our favor. So that's what we're working towards. But right now we're doing that syndicated approach.
Got it. What's the mindset for shifting to a fund model? I mean, discretionary capital is great, but what are you guys thinking?
It's easier to scale with a fund. And I know you had Dave Allred on here who talked a little bit about that too. And a lot of what he said was spot on with why we're doing it too. But it's just scalability. And when you have to raise money on a deal specific basis, it's a lot of work to constantly, here's the next deal. And now who are we going to find that's going to come in and fund this project? Yep. Whereas, and there's some more risks there too with, which is why we pay higher returns in that model of, your return is based on the performance of that one asset, right? Whereas in a fund, if you're investing in a fund, it's typically diversified across a lot of different assets. And so as an investor, it reduces your risk profile. But from our standpoint, if we have a fund, well, you're pooling in the money to that fund, and we're able to then deploy the funds based on our investment strategy in multiple deals. So now I'm not just funding, this project, I'm funding, 4 of my projects all at once. It's through that medium. So it's just a better way to scale our business.
Makes perfect sense. That's great. Well, what's next for you guys? I mean, 1,600 units in the pipeline. What's the vision for Surge Development? What do you see for that?
Yeah. Well, our goal is to be one of the top developers in the country, right? And for us, that means obviously there's size, right? And volume of units that you're doing. And I don't ever want to be number one on the volume. I can't do 16,000 units a year on construction starts. That's just not who I want to be, right? But to be in the top, I think 20, 25, you need to be doing about between 1,600 and 2,000 construction starts per year. And I think that's quite achievable for us. Not next year, but, within the next 3 to 5 years, I think we can if we build it right, we can achieve that kind of volume. But for us, being the best multifamily developer in the country means we're creating the best experience for our partners, right? So for our investors, for the architects and engineers and cities that we work with, we want to be have the best reputation in the industry as far as people want to work with us. So that's what we're building. We have a long ways to go, right? We've got some of our teams quite young and inexperienced, and we're training them up to be able to accomplish that vision. But that's what we're working towards.
That's amazing. Yeah, and I have no doubt you guys will be successful. I mean, just based off the trajectory that you've set so far, it sounds like you guys are doing insane volume and just getting after it. So that's awesome, Paul. I wanted to ask your thoughts on the current real estate market. With rates doubling, cost of debt, cost of construction. Have you guys had to, rethink about deals you have under contract, go retrade? How are you looking at new deals? What's your mindset there?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think everyone who's in business right now is attentive to what's happening. And we've had to retrade some deals. I've had to cancel some deals that, they worked really well when we put them under contract last spring, but because of the changing market, they haven't been as good, right? And when I cancel a deal, it's always, in my mind of, can I really pitch this to my investors, right? Can I pitch this to our capital partners? And if a deal ever goes below that threshold, then, we cancel it. And sometimes that hurts. I've had to lose quite a bit of money on spending that entitlement process or that entitlement money, getting far along in that process and just saying, it doesn't make sense anymore. But yeah, we've had to cancel a couple deals. Some because just the numbers didn't work, others because the seller wasn't willing to work with us on the appropriate time frame extensions that we've needed to have in order to make the deal work. But even with that, we're not down on the market. The market's going to do what the market's going to do, and I'm not an expert, on the economy, right? It's not my forte. But what I do believe in is the asset class that we're in. I think multifamily traditionally and historically has been a recession-resistant asset class. We're not the top of the market. We're not the bottom of the market. There are people that always need to have a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom apartment to live in. That's reasonably affordable. Now, we do all market rate, but it's typically on the entry level market on market rate housing. So I think our asset class is right. And to me, it's just about the timeframes of when we can exit, right? So maybe in this market, we can't build it and sell it in 2 years and get the kind of profit margins that we want. But if we extend that timeline, is maybe we build it and we hold on to it for a year or 2 years. Well, your annualized return might go from a 40% that we've done historically to maybe a 30% at that point, but it's a safer strategy that we can hold on to it for longer as we wait for the market to rebound. So we're still actively funding projects, and we're still actively picking up new projects, but we have slowed down and become a lot more particular as far as when and where those projects are taken on.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, the market right now is presenting more opportunities than I think there were a year ago. It's just being very selective. It's a little bit of a double-edged sword where there's an opportunity. On the other side of that, it's are you catching a falling sword? How much more downside is there within the next 6 to 12 months with rates or the economy? But sounds like you're approaching it similar to how we are. Is we think there's opportunity. Being conservative, making sure that you can sell it appropriately to debt, to equity in your investors to get deals across the finish line. So,
yeah, I think for us it's all just about mitigating potential risks too, right? Making sure that your deals have plenty of margin in there for error and for the economy to do whatever it wants to do and still be in a safe position for your assets. And that's really the approach that we've taken.
Yeah. I want to ask Paul on raising capital, the equity side, what would be some advice you have for a budding entrepreneur or real estate, developer or operator to go out and raise money, meet people, do that whole thing?
Yeah. That's funny because I don't necessarily know how to answer that question. Like if you ask me, I think I'm not that good at raising capital, but you look at what we did last year and we raised over $30 million in equity. So, wow. But I can't tell you like what I did to necessarily accomplish that kind of volume. the things that come to mind are one, be willing to put in the time to be an appealing person for people to invest in, right? And we talked about this at the very beginning, and that is, you need to gain the experience and the resume to say you're a good bet, right? And once you do have that experience to show people that you know what you're doing, then it's all about just building relationships, right? I'm not a pushy salesman when it comes to people investing with me. I give them the facts of what we can do for them. I show them what we've done historically, and I say, hey, it's your decision. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll follow up and ask what they're thinking, but I don't do anything to try and push them. So I think a lot of people appreciate that because they know that to me, it's my relationship with them is the most valuable part to me, not their money. And when you do show them performance, when you show them one that you care, I'm constantly calling them and seeing, if they have any questions. We do these regular partner updates. So monthly we'll do a call, and then monthly we'll also send them a detailed email with all the things that we've done in the past. And we had one of those yesterday, and it's a project that's early on. We just kind of went over, hey, here's the things that we're doing. It's a lot of good news. There's some bad news on this deal. And I had two of our capital partners reach out to me after that and say, hey, really impressed with that. I've got another $100,000 I want to put in a deal, or I've got this amount that I want to put in a deal. And so really just taking care of them and making sure that they're our first priority. And if they can see that, then they're going to trust you with more and more of their capital.
Yeah, agreed. It's so important to build trust and relationships and to be able to be more than just like a quarterly check, right? Because there's plenty of deals out there. There's plenty of developers or operators, but I think the differentiator is the trust, the relationships, and the customer experience or investor experience that you're providing them. And you mentioned providing updates, the details, answering questions. So yeah, and what I've seen is there's no magic bullet to raising capital. It's not as easy as, hey, here's one track that we're going to take, and that's going to be the ultimate way to success. It's a lot of different things. It's a lot of it's a lot of lunches. It's a lot of calls. It's a lot of in-person meetings. It's building a brand. It's building trust, and telling your story is also super important. Your experience. Yeah,
and a lot of patience too. A year ago, our average investment, I guess we ended last year, our average investment per capital partner was probably between $800,000 and $1 million, which is pretty high for the industry, right? But we were killing it, right? And now I'd say our average investment is $100,000. And sometimes that happens, right? Especially with economy slowing down, a lot more people are hesitant. And I've noticed a little that picking back up again, but it's being just as grateful for $100,000 as you are for $1 million, right?
Yeah.
And anyone who's trusting you with any amount of capital, it's a big thing for them. And taking care of that, regardless of who it is and what it is a key. And I think that trickles down into, if you're handling it right and respecting everybody and what they do, then more is going to flow to you.
Mm-hmm. Of the 30 you guys raised last year, 30 million, is that pretty much all high net worth investor capital, or do you have any? Is that family offices, or are there bigger checks coming in from individuals?
Most of it's high net worth individuals. There are two organizations that have invested with us with some higher checks, but those aren't family offices. They're more smaller discretionary funds. So we know the fund manager, and our deals fit their investment thesis, and we're able to work with them. But I think that accounts for about 7 million of the 30.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, that's great. Well, Paul, just a couple last questions here for you. You've had a lot of success for being young. I mean, I think you're around 30.
I turn 30 next month. Okay. Yeah.
So not even 30 yet. Have had a ton of success, and you're on a track to. You've made a good amount of money. You're obviously going to be making some more here as you guys grow. But when you think about money, what kind of role does it play in your life, and what's kind of your goal there, and how do you kind of view it? Yeah.
Well, obviously being young, right? I sometimes lack experience. And so where I lack with experience, I try and just read a lot of books, right, of people who have been there and done it. And I would say that I've adopted a very similar approach to money than many people that I've at least read about that have been quite successful. And that is, it's not that important. And don't get me wrong, like money's important as far as what it can do for you. But a lot of people that I know that haven't experienced this kind of success are very particular about their money and very careful about it. And there's something to be said about being wise with your finances. Like everyone should be wise with it, but to be stingy with your finances, I think is something that bothers me when I see people do that. And all money is it's a tool that can enhance your life, right? And the more that you use it wisely, I think the better experience that you're going to have with money. And for me, using it wisely is obviously I'm investing in my company, right? And I'm putting in things that are going to, continue to grow my money. And the motivation behind that is not so much to get money. It's all the things that I can do with more money one day, right? One of my personal mission statements is to live a life that's unparalleled, right? And for me, that means being able to experience everything that I want to experience. And in order to do that, you have to have funds, right? Like I can't go to Antarctica like I just did if I only have $1,000 to my name, right? And so there's these opportunities that get opened up to you when you have more money and more success. And I want a lot of those experiences and opportunities in my life, which is why I'm doing what I'm doing.
I love it. Right? Yeah, that's great. And that's something that has been hit on numerous times in this podcast. You touched on it, is shifting from like a stingy or scarcity mindset to like an abundance mindset, and knowing that what goes around comes around. And it's something that I've really been trying to intentionally work on, even like leaving a tip for somebody who maybe you typically wouldn't, or spending the extra money to get something a little bit nicer for a gift or a family member, just because when it's like, oh, it's so scarce, I think it ripples through every aspect of your life, through your business, through your family. And so although it's a tough thing to do when you don't have a ton, it's so important, I think, have that shift and just think bigger and go that route.
Saying that I adopted at a pretty early age is experience is always worth the investment. I think one of the problems is you see a lot of people that do make some money and they spend it on things, right? And assets are great to spend it on. Liabilities aren't. And the liability is anything that's not actively generating cash flow. But experience to me is always worth the investment. So, and a good example of wrapping or going back to our earlier conversation is when coming out of college, I started at Sumatera or at Mike Watson Investing for $1,600 a month, right? Well, how many people coming out of college that are smart and have an opportunity to work for an $80,000 or $80,000 annual salary would make that sacrifice, right? And there's a lot of people that look at money that way as I need to make what I'm worth. But the real way you should be looking at it is I need to learn everything I can so that one day I can be worth even more, right? So it's about making sacrifice in the short term with money, and that's experience as far as education, experience as far as getting to travel and get new perspective. And there's a lot of different things that experience could cover. But I think that people oftentimes aren't willing to spend money on experience as much as they should. And those that are willing to do that end up getting a better yield on their investment than anything else that you could use with your or buy with your money.
I love it. That's such good advice, Paul. Thank you for that, man. Well, last question I have, just in terms of advice you have for budding entrepreneurs, somebody who wants to start a business, has been on the sidelines or hesitant for whatever reason. I guess throughout your experiences, what would be, and I know it's a tough question, but one piece of advice you'd give to somebody starting up a business or company?
Yeah, just do it. Like so many people talk about wanting to do it, right? And then what happens? Like life happens. You might get married, you have kids, or you have this job that you get really comfortable with. And the longer you wait, the less likely you are to do it. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't people that do it at a later age. Statistically, as an entrepreneur, you're more likely to be successful the more education that you have. So I'm not saying education is not a good thing and you shouldn't pursue that. But at the end of the day, if you're an entrepreneur and you want to go that route, then now's better than tomorrow, right? And to overcome those fears of what if this happens? What if this happens? The only way you'll overcome those is just get out and do it. Like, it's never going to be a perfect time to start your own business. So if that's your goal, make plans today and execute on those plans. Right.
It's great. Love it, man. And you guys are doing that. For anyone listening, go check out Surge Development. Follow Paul on LinkedIn. Are you on Instagram as well?
No, I don't have an Instagram. Okay. I'm on Facebook. Facebook and LinkedIn are my only social media accounts I have.
Facebook and LinkedIn. Go check out Surge. They're doing awesome things. Well, yeah. Thanks again, Paul. Really excited for you guys' growth and success, and glad we could do this. No,
I really appreciate you having me and seeing some of the other guests that you had. I just feel honored that to be thought of in the same group as those guys. So thanks for having me, and it's been great chatting with you.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, Paul.